Hello and welcome to episode 229 of the Filmmakers podcast. This is a podcast where we talk filmmaking, from indie film to studio films and everything in between. How to get them made, how to try and make them, and how to try not to F it up, in a very, very humble opinion. I am Giles Alderson. I'm a writer, director and a producer, and our guest on today's show is Saim Sadiq. He is a Pakistani screenwriter and director who won the jury prize of the Uncertain Regard section at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival for directing the drama film Joyland, the film we're here to talk about today. It happened to be the first Pakistani film to be selected in Cannes. Joyland also won the Queer Palm Award during its world premiere in Cannes. His first short, Nice Talking to You, was an official selection at the South by Southwest and Palm Springs in 2019 and was BAFTA shortlisted for Best Student Film. Saim says that his filmmaking has been inspired by his upbringing and discovery of a transgender community in Lahore that is only a 10-minute ride from his childhood home. Joining me on today's show as my fellow hosts is Matthew Butler-Hart and Tori Butler-Hart. They're both fantastic filmmakers. They run Fizz and Ginger Films. They have made the films Miss in Her Teens, Two Down, The Isle, and Infinitum Subject Unknown with Ian McKellen. And they've written the excellent book on filmmaking, Full to the Brim, with Fizz, Ginger and Fierce Determination, a modern guide to independent filmmaking. Any filmmakers out there who just want to brush up on the skills you've already learned, or you're new to this game, get that book. Link to that should be in the show notes if I put it in there. If not, just rewind and listen to what I said and then go on Amazon and buy it. I am in Australia at the moment. I am in my apartment, hence why the air conditioning is on, doing this intro for you because I want to get all the podcasts out so that you can learn more and go out there and make your films. That's the whole point of this, so you can be inspired, as I have been, by these amazing guests. What myself, Matthew and Tori talk about with Saim Sadiq on today's episode is obviously all about Joyland, his amazing film. We talk about what it's like trying to make films in Pakistan, how you can be creative there and where ideas come from. We talk about the trans culture and patriarchy and his writing process and why he loves collaboration. Let's talk about where his money came from to make this film. And interestingly, it might not be where you expect it to come from. We talk about having belief in your project, pitching to investors and working with your DOPs. And we also dive deep into why you need to be patient as a director and why he shot the film in 4:3. Right, I am off to go out and enjoy the Australian sunshine, as I should do. Having my first little break for about 10 years. So, without any further bump or ado, here is this week's episode of the Filmmakers podcast with myself and Matthew and Tori and the amazing Saim Sadiq. Enjoy.
Hi.
There we go.
How's this?
Lovely.
Excellent jumper as well, sir.
That's a really lovely jumper.
I'm a big fan of a good jumper. That's a great jumper.
Thank you so much, guys.
So for those listening on the podcast, it's a beautiful white woolly jumper with...
It's almost sort of a
the Nordic.
Scandi-Nordic.
I go Scandi Nordic. Yeah.
Scandi Nordic look.
Yeah.
My friend's sister gave it to me. She said wear it at some point. She has a brand where she kind of styles people, gets clothes from thrift shops. It's actually from a thrift shop.
Ah, nice. Bit of vintage.
It can't be that. How are you feeling today?
Been good. We had a nice screening. Yeah, 2 nice screenings yesterday, actually. So all good.
Where are you at the moment?
I'm still in London.
You're in London? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hence the jumper. Okay. Now it makes
Hence the
sense.
jumper. No, I was wearing it in the US also and in Pakistan.
Okay, great.
I'm utilizing it everywhere.
How does it feel at the moment? Because obviously you're getting so much love for Joyland and you're travelling around the world, like you say, and you're in the UK right now.
The thought process is, I don't know, to just do the right thing, because we're promoting a film and then you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to be? You're supposed to be at 5 different places at the same time and you're supposed to give an interview, go to a Q&A and which are all great things. But also they're like, oh, take it in, it's not going to last. And I'm like, okay, where's the time to take it in? There's no time to take it in.
This is your debut feature, isn't it, as a director?
This is my debut feature, yeah. So I was
extraordinary.
Very surprised that 10 months after I finished the film, I'm still working. And I'm like, how's that? Nobody told me that, you know? I was not told that there's a lot of work after you make the film.
Only 10 months. I'm like, wow. Sometimes it's like good couple of years.
10 years sometimes.
No, but like, I mean every day, every single day since we premiered, and I thought I'm done. That was 24th of May in 2022, and I'm like, I'm done. Let's go. Let's do
what's
something else.
What's the next one? And you're like, no, it's another festival.
What's the next one? And I'm like, I still don't have like an outline for the next one because I just haven't had the time. So that's quite strange, but it's also a good problem to have because clearly the film's releasing everywhere. If the film didn't have any distribution or wasn't going anywhere, I would have a next film, but I'm not sure if I'll be happier or not.
It's also such a massive film for Pakistan as well. I mean, like the sort of the cultural ripples that must be happening because of this film. I would assume it's not, it's keeping you busy. I'd imagine it's extraordinary.
I don't know. I personally have never thought about, maybe because it's my first film, or generally that's like not something that excites me when I'm making the film, that it's gonna have this or this impact. That's never really in my head. I'm kind of very selfish in that sense of like making the film for my own self. Like I want to see the scene and I want to do it like this, and so that my interests are very creative, very character driven. So any and all sort of things that have happened with the film, a lot of them great, a lot of them quite traumatizing with the ban and stuff. They've been quite surprising. Just the level of reaction, good and bad, has been quite surprising, because in my head I was like, I hope like a couple hundred people watch the film. So because there was no standard of like what to expect from a first film with not any big stars, with in an Urdu and Punjabi, I was like, I don't know what an appetite for a world audience even is for a Pakistani film. One has never sort of tested that. Like if you put a film out from that part of the world, and it's not the kind of film that you expect it to be. It's not about sort of the two or three things that, it's not about terrorism. It's sort of not checking any of the boxes that people are usually used to seeing a film from a Muslim world to be about. Right. Then I was like, I don't know if people want to watch a family drama and a romance from Pakistan, like who wants to watch that? I don't know.
What we were discussing after watching the film, I think that's what's so brilliant about it, is that you mentioned that you are very character driven in the story that you wanted to tell and how you wrote it. And that comes across in like bucket loads. That watching it, I think there's a character in there that everyone can identify with. That's what's so clever about it, is that, it isn't just about that beautiful relationship that is formed between the husband and the trans character. It's actually, it's as much about his wife. Yeah. It's as much about the father and age, and how, like, how we look after our elderly. And, there's so many layers within it, which is sort of just like a brilliant balance. I guess my question is sort of, where did the sort of the kernel of the idea come from?
The kernel of the idea came from, one never really knows, like you just wake up one day and there's like a germ in your head and you're like, okay, what do you do with that? And you start developing it. I was in school and I had to write a script for my like second year. Like you had to write a script every year. And so I was just thinking of ideas because I had to write it, almost like an assignment, So I knew that I'd have to start writing in a couple of months, when I was still in my first year, when I was thinking of what is my script going to be for the second year. And I was just thinking, and one day I had this sort of very sort of template idea of like, okay, it's like a love triangle. We've seen like a guy between two girls kind of a situation. That's a template, but let's do it with a guy, a man, a woman, and a trans woman instead. And that sort of allowed me suddenly to talk about a lot of things that I organically just wanted to talk about, like patriarchy, like identity and desire, and the sort of the shame associated with desire in general. So that I remember that being the sort of the kernel of the idea. And I was like, okay, this is fun because it can be a template film for like 15 minutes in the beginning, and then I can do whatever I want with it.
Right.
So I can pull you in as an audience with this, everybody wants to watch this. Oh, he's married, but he's falling in love. Okay, everybody wants to watch that. Okay, great. And now I can do what I want. Now I can sort of actually look at all three of them individually. And then in sort of pairs, and see how sort of we want to root for all three of them when they're as individuals in terms of sort of having a sense of self-actualization or exploring what they want. But when you put them together, what they want is in conflict with each other. And then who do you root for? Do you root for the wife or do you root for the husband? But what they want is going in separate directions. So that kind of, excited me. And I was like, okay, there's a lot to do here. And then eventually it turned into a full ensemble film, with the father and the sister-in-law and this neighbor. And I like that idea of sort of a very collectivist way of telling a story about individual desire. Not turning it into a very protagonist film where he comes of age and then we're very happy that, he got some freedom at the end, to really sort of take those ideas and see what they mean and how they impact a very South Asian local setting. And in that sense, I think it had to be sort of an ensemble film.
With your writing process there that you touched on a little bit, first of all, how long did it take you to write in total? And, how many drafts did you feel?
I did about 17. In the one that we shot, I think, was draft 17.
Right.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. It feels about right.
Yeah.
Some of them were big changes. Some of them were they were very character specific. Okay, we're doing this draft. Like the last 5-6 drafts were pretty similar to each other for 80%. We were trying to crack this one particular character sort of arc. So we were focused on that. But there were also these big changes, like page 1 rewrites and stuff in the beginning. So I think the whole process of just getting to the script that we shot was about 6.5 years.
Right.
6.5 years.
6.5 years.
I started writing beginning of 2016. I started writing, and then 2021 September we were shooting.
You had a co-writer, is that right?
Yes, Maggie.
Maggie, yeah.
For the last 2 drafts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us a little bit about why Maggie came on board and how you kind of worked together?
Change the writing relationship.
Maggie is the friend who gave me this, whose sister gave me.
Excellent.
Maggie's here. Maggie was also she went to school with me. She was in the same year at Columbia with me. And we're just she's one of my closest friends. We're a group of 3-4 friends who always sort of bounce our scripts off of each other and, read every draft and give notes, etc. And we were doing just that actually somewhere in the summer of 2021, early summer. And I knew that we just ended up having a very long conversation for about 6-7 hours. And I was like, you're not giving me ideas now. You're not giving me feedback, and I have to go. And I'm stressed. The reason we're on this call is because I'm stressed because I have to start pre-production, and I have to start I have to workshop with the actors. I have to spend so much time with the production design and DP. I don't know. I know these problems, and I know what the fixes are, perhaps, but I don't have time to try these things. And she's like, I can try, and I was like, okay, great, go ahead, try it. I just handed over the script to her while I went, and then we would just talk all the time. I would call her every night and see, okay, where we at, and then she just churned out a draft very quickly, and then another one, and it was mostly to do with Mumtaz's character that we
the wife, yeah,
right,
okay.
Wife's character, and
I wondered if it was the female voice that
yeah. And it was interesting because at that point in time, what we were discussing was spoilers. I mean, you guys have seen the film, but without the spoilers, basically the third act of the film. And the third act of the film has always been the same, pretty much the same, the whatever happens, but how it happens, the way it was going to sort of come about was something that was kind of tricky. And I do think that in that sense, I realized that having a woman's perspective and having a woman sort of, come on board to contextualize that emotional state for Mumtaz's character, I think was very, very key, because it doesn't take a lot of screen time, but it's such an integral thing. It's kind of the biggest thing that happens in the film, really, because
it's
not
very
much
powerful.
Happens. So I was like, this is the most dramatic thing that's going to happen in the film, and it's surprising because you don't expect it's going to have something to do with her. You're kind of too busy watching the romance, and that's the point. But so she was golden for that purpose. Yeah,
it's fascinating because so many writers are kind of. I suppose it's very brave of you to do that, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way in any way, but a lot of writers are very protective of their work, and to just sort of go, okay, well, you have a go when you're literally really close to production is like I say, that's admirable and very brave to go, actually, I'm struggling here, I've got a lot to do, can you help me make this work.
Yeah. Well, it sort of speaks volumes to the trust that you two obviously have, and the belief in one another as well. I mean, that's like, you know, an amazing kind of partnership and collaboration to have found.
I mean, I'd read so many things that she'd written before. So, I mean, I just generally had like a great amount of respect for her as a writer. And it was really like, it was not even like now we say that, oh, because she's a woman. And so it helped a lot. So those things, of course, are, you know, you comment on those things in hindsight. But at that time, it was just us having a phone call. And I'm like, yeah, your brain is working in the same way as mine, but better. So, you know, with like better ideas, it's like kind of more fertile at this point in time with regard to these things that we're talking about. And so let me tell you whatever I have thought of, and then can you try this? And we had many ideas about how to go about it. So at some point we were like, okay, you write the third act as well, and I'll write the third act, and we'll exchange notes. And I was actually writing what she was advocating for, and she was writing what I was advocating for.
Right.
To be able to, so we had it like, you know, we would come up with an idea and fight about it, and the next day we would call each other and be like, actually I like yours, and she'd be like, no, actually I like yours better, you know.
And each idea, and it's
relationship.
filtering through the other person to make a really nice balance. Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. But on that then as well, it must be really nice to have that, like you say, a fresh voice come in, because you've been working on this, you said, for, you know, 6 years. 6.5 years. So to someone come in totally fresh to give it that, well, this bit works, and you get so bogged down in stuff that's yours, and you get held onto it, and you go, no, this works because I spent 4 years dragging that bit to get it to where it needed to be. Before that, though, what was your writing process? You as the writer before you brought on Maggie. How did you do it? Did you just literally vomit draft it out, as in just get the words on the page? Did you develop it over time? Did you put notes up all over your house? It'd be lovely to know.
I don't put notes all over my house. I put them on my phone. So I had some natural habit of I'm always writing, even when I don't know what I'm writing. Like even right like now, like in the plane over to London, I was just making notes about like this particular idea that I had, and I was just like, okay, it just goes in your phone. It's the quickest way to compile everything and make sure you don't forget it. So I like had started doing that way back in 2015 for, you know, this that I actually started writing in the middle of the spring of 2020, so spring of 2016. And I outlined first because I like having a bit of structure, like certain steps to be able to sort of jump through and be like, okay, now you have to get person from A step to B step, and, you know, so just kind of broadly structuring the film. And I don't start writing actually on the page until much later, like much later. Like I delay it as much as possible because I like to know as much as I can and ideate as much as I can before I actually start typing. So actually the amount of time I spend on actually writing is very little. Because I had so much figured out, some of the like many scenes with dialogues and being like, okay, this is going to be like, you're going to cut from here to here. A lot has been figured out before I actually start typing. You know, so it's all on my phone, and I sometimes wonder if somebody steals my phone. I'm like, years of work, man. It's going to be lost. Yeah, because it helps to kind of I need to sort of be very confident before, and like sort of accumulating all that material before I step onto like final draft and start typing. I need to be very, like, it takes a while for me to get confident enough that A, this is a script that I want to write, and B, that I'm aware enough and prepared enough to actually write it. You know, otherwise I'll write one scene and I'll be like, this is bullshit. It's so stupid. Let's not do this.
I think you can see that though. I think like there's such beautiful layers in the structuring of it and the writing, everything. You can see like there's just this amazing depth. And where you're talking
well
now,
developed the characters
so
are,
well developed. Everything about it is just like so multi-layered and faceted. Like I think you can see that work in the best possible way. I mean,
I've got a quick question sort of on that note. Like, how much research did you do into sort of trans culture within Pakistani society, like, and I guess historically, like, is there much historically of sort of trans culture within the Pakistani community?
There's a big history of trans culture, actually.
Right, that's what I thought. Yeah,
history being rather beautiful, and the post-colonial history, unfortunately, being rather brutal. And discriminatory. So we kind of, the trans people have always been a part of our culture, like way back in the Mughal era, you know, and sort of had like a very prestigious position in royal courts, you know, were very associated with the arts, you know, there was just a general sense of queerness in the artists of that time, in the poets and writers and painters of that time, which was rather beautiful. It wasn't queerness was a very inherent part of South Asian culture. Funnily enough, even though despite being rather sort of religiously motivated at that time as well, with a big section of Muslims and a big section of Hindus as well, but it was post colonization that the laws, it was the homosexuality, being a transgender, all of these things were sort of turned into criminal acts. And that's something that we inherited, and then we just stuck with it till date, unfortunately, where the people who colonized moved on and got, but we've sort of held on to those very discriminatory laws. And so there is a beautiful history, and then there's a discriminatory history, and then of course, but at the heart of it, it's a very indigenous movement, and that has sort of shaped itself and gotten out of these problematic patches in history. This one in particular is also a rather problematic patch in history, I think, for trans people everywhere in the world, not just in Pakistan. So I knew all of that. I knew all of that was something that I needed to know without trying to force it into the film.
Absolutely.
As sort of a lesson of okay, this has happened, because I was like, she's just one character. I'm not giving you the history of what men have done or women have done or what old people have done. I'm not going to give you that for the trans people. If you get interested enough, you can obviously, the conversation will happen post the film, and you'll find out all about all of these things. But I did research a lot, and I made a short film 3 years before I did Joyland, when I already had a draft of Joyland script. And I decided to do a thesis film precisely as almost like a research project.
Right.
My thesis was Darling. So I went to Pakistan. I stayed there for 6 months. I was like, I'm here to make a short film. So I started looking for, primarily the most important thing was to find a Biba, because there are no trans actors in Pakistan. So again, that search meant just meeting tons and tons of trans girls, auditioning them, talking to them, just seeing who's going to be comfortable and interested in being an actress. So we had to kind of create an actress, out of who we thought had the charm and the capacity to do it and had the interest to do it. Because it was going to be like a short film. We didn't tell them that there was a feature. We told them there was an audition for a short film, but really the whole short film was kind of like a big audition for the feature.
Yeah.
So that, and then of course, just spending a lot of time in just talking to even the ones who were not interested in auditioning, but were sort of, interested in sort of sharing their stories and their lives, and I would spend hours and hours just, chatting with them and seeing whatever, one can.
Which just added to the authenticity of the character. And there's that beautiful wedding scene as well, which I think sort of hints at the history behind the culture, but without, as you say, without kind of hitting anyone over the head with it or with, kind of shoehorning it in. It's just like a nod to it. It's really beautifully done.
Well, I mean, it is difficult because the industry, there was no industry to speak of if you sort of look back on, say, 15 years. There was literally no film industry. There was a big television industry and a booming television industry. And today it's boomed into, this big sort of giant thing, Pakistani television. But films were there were no theaters. There used to be up until the early 90s. But then because of an Islamic dictatorship, there was a crackdown. And then theaters were basically non-existent by the time, we were somewhere around 2005, 2006. And there's still date, now of course you see, I would say about 25, 30 films a year post the pandemic, which includes a lot of films that had gotten stalled. So, the last year, I think we had a good amount of films, we had at least 3 or 4 films almost every month, which is a great ratio. For given I haven't seen that many films released in Pakistan or get made in Pakistan in my entire lifetime. That's great, but it's a very, I want to say that it's very, people are doing whatever they want to do. There's no government support. There's no state sort of funding or interest at all in terms of, creating a system that would benefit you, whether it's in terms of tax incentives or whether it's in terms of any funds for any upcoming filmmakers, etc. There's nothing,
we had noticed at the beginning of the credits there were a lot of production companies. So we were wondering, basically the money, how it's the same for every company. But I wondered, how does that work?
So it's all most of it is American money.
Okay.
It's all American producers. I mean, they're either American based or based in the UK. There's one producer that we have who's from Pakistan, who's Sarmat Pusat. And the rest are, and Apurva, of course, is from India, and she's the lead producer, but the rest are all from the US. Mm-hmm. That's what you end up doing then. You either sort of go the European route where you apply for a bunch of funds for international films, like the French funds or the Swedish funds, etc. Or in our case, what we ended up doing was we just actually got equity financiers to come on.
Wow. How did you go about doing that? Because, like I say, it's always the tricky thing as a filmmaker to suddenly go, oh my gosh, we've got to go raise this much money, and you're kind of putting a guess box in what it could be, because it could be that or it could be that. It just, you can make it for whatever you can make it for. How did you go about that? Talk us through your process and the team behind you who really sort of helped you, I suppose.
So no, I wouldn't take any credit for doing that. It was my producer, Apurva. So she was in the same class that I started writing Joyland in, the first time that I was writing the first draft. She was also in my year at Columbia. So when the first draft was submitted, she came to me and she's like, I'm going to produce it. She was a producing track student. Brilliant. And I was like, great, take it.
I definitely don't want to do that.
Yes, sounds good.
So she worked in LA. She worked with Disney. She was working with, as a writer's assistant, as a, she had like these early jobs. And then she was also applying to a bunch of places. So she got into the creative producing lab at Film Independent. And then she got into Fast Track. So we had to sort of pitch for like 60, there were 60 meetings that we had to pitch the film over and over and over again to different people over 3 days. And it was like nuts, like speed dating. But good. We got our first sort of financing out of that. Lauren Mann, who's a producer on The Army Man and Card Counter, she came on board, and then that was January 2021. And then somehow we had just Apurva had a budget which was particularly certain, and Apurva and Sarmad and my producer in Pakistan. They had sort of been working together for a couple of months to create a budget and to create sort of an infrastructure of how we'll go about making the film, once we get the money. So we were particularly sure about, like, this is as much as we'll be spending, especially at least in production and in pre-production. And the first piece of financing came, and then it just, one after the other, every month till September, we got from January to September, every month we got a new piece of financing, and we still didn't have all of our financing when we went into production, actually. We had enough to produce the film. We didn't have post-production financing. But we still decided to shoot the film because if we delayed it more, I needed it to be a bit of a summer weather. And Lahore looks completely different post-November. Like in December, it's like a different city. It's very foggy. Right. All the leaves are sort of, the trees are sort of, barren. And so we couldn't afford to push it. We'd have to shoot the next year.
Right.
So we just went and we shot the film. And then during
Did you use some of the footage to get the post-production budget afterwards? Did you sort of cut to like a little reel together, or how did
no? There were some daily, so I think Apurva's used to use, but like we got the money that we received some funds like somewhere in the middle of the shoot, which we had sort of been in talks with during production as well. We were just waiting for them to hear back from them, and we were just glad that we didn't delay the shoot in the waiting process, and then we wait. Faith in that sense, and she took a leap of faith in a way, actually, because I know this now. I was completely distanced from the money conversation during the pre-production and production. I had no clue. All I knew was like, oh, we've got the full money today, and I was like, oh, in the middle of the shoot, and I was like,
did we not before
money? Okay.
Damn. Yeah. I was hoping on Friday we were going to have a Steadicam, but it sounds like, hopefully we can now. In terms of Steadicam, I was like, yes. Okay. In terms of, you said there that, and wonderfully, she just went, oh, yes, we've got some money. Oh, and yes, we've got some more money. Did you have to pitch on any of that? Did you have to do pitch decks? Did you have to present anything to prove why you, could handle it, making a feature film and handle, the material? Yeah,
I did. Like, I mean, the first meeting I would always sort of be in with any sort of person that most of the times I would be in a first meeting when we had to pitch, so I would pitch the story. Then we had the script, of course. Then we had a whole sort of creative deck and a production deck that she had made and a creative deck that I had made, which was the mood board. The sort of pictures of the actors who we had cast already, even a bunch of them we had already cast even before we got any financing, because it helped to just put a face to the character, that you're reading about, to be like, okay, this is the face that's going to play this character. So it kind of just, again, just sounds like a real movie, when everything is still in a PDF. And then we had Darling as a short film, and my other short film before that with 2 sort of samples as well of directing. And they usually, all of the producers who came on board, I have to say they were very trusting. I don't know. I pitched the story once, and usually that was also just before they read the script. If they'd read the script, they wouldn't ask me to pitch or anything. They were quite respectful and very, very sort of nice in terms of, probably sometimes had a couple of creative questions, but just very, very generous in terms of, we like this movie, we like the script, we can see that you can direct. We've seen 2 short films, so, we are interested in doing this, or we're not interested in doing this, but it wasn't like, putting us through unnecessary loops in that sense. They didn't. No, so they were very generous and kind.
But did you always believe that the film would happen? A lot of independent filmmakers listen to this, and you're in that position where you have a script and you're fighting, and then you got another script and you're fighting to get that one made. It's this constant battle. Well, while you were sort of prepping the movie, and it seemed like it came around quite quick once you'd got to the, after the 6.5 years of getting your script to where you wanted it to be. How was that for you? Were you prepping in a way that you are making this film? Because as filmmakers, we've all gone through that phase where we start prepping a film in our heads and then it falls apart. And it can be heartbreaking because you then have to start again on the next one. And it's that. How was that for you? Talk us through your process during that time, and how did it feel to be going, oh, I'm actually going to be making a feature film?
No, I always believed it.
Okay.
I don't know if it's like a naive or a cocky thing to be like. I was like, I don't know if I'll make films in general. I know I'll make this film. I don't know if I'll be a filmmaker, but I'll make this film for sure. This film is going to happen. Wow. And part of it has to do with my belief. Part of it, I had probably had an equally, a sort of a believing producer with me. And then every person who came on board, whether it was Sarmad or Sana, my casting director, who came on board very early, way back in 2020, or the actors who came on board, they said all approached it with this weird sense of belief that it was going to happen. And we did. The film did fall apart once, completely. And it was in March 2021. It kind of started falling apart, and then we had a row with another producer and blah blah blah. I can't talk much about it, but
okay,
it became a sort of a legal thing. And it was this film is. But even then, the threats were from the other side that we'll stop your movie. What will you do? I was like, you can't do that. The movie's gonna get made for sure. And I remember having this weird sense of, this was an established person, and I'm a new filmmaker, and I was fighting and on the phone and having this sort of weird sense of belief that you can do a lot of things, you can't stop this movie. And I don't know where that came from. It makes no sense, she turned around and be she laughed at my face, actually, I remember. She cackled on the phone and she's like, ha ha ha, nobody's going to make this film if it has this and this an issue. And I was like, watch it. And then 3 months later, we were shooting the film. And we eventually had to resolve things and all. But, oh my God, my lawyer's going to kill me.
Good for you. I love that belief. Yes, love that belief.
Exactly.
Yeah, we all need that sometimes. We all need that shake up.
I think you need to be a little cuckoo. Because it's such a strange thing, you're sitting in your room and you say, I'm going to make a movie. Just even if you have some money, it sounds weird. How? It's such a big thing to do, to get 200 people to sort of, come together. It's you have to kind of be a little bit naive and stupid on some level to be able to be
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without it, you start questioning yourself. So just don't even listen to it.
No, there's not on that level. Creatively, you should question yourself, not on that level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's brilliant. That's so nice. That stage you're totally believing you're going to make it. So you now have the money. What was, that process like? You're now going, great, I've got the money. Oh gosh, now I've got to actually deliver. I've got to make this. Obviously you had that lot of prep time and a lot of talking through it. How did you prep in your mind to go, okay, I'm making this now. How am I going to do day to day? How am I going to get through this? What am I going to do?
I really enjoyed it because, when you've sort of been waiting for such a long time, you've kind of thought about like, oh, the first day of workshops with my actors, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And, I'll try this. And you've also kind of daydreamed about all the problems and the issues. You're like, oh, what if my actor is like a total asshole? What will I do then? Interesting. Let's think about that. So you had so much time for 6 years to think about all problems that you get excited that, oh, I have solutions ready, everything I know. But I have to say, the pre-production, I did get a bit stressed at some point because I was like, oh, there's so much to do, and I don't know if I'm doing enough. Am I sleeping too much? Am I doing enough things? Am I, I still don't know what the color of the curtains is in that particular room. That's odd. I need to know. So I would call up my department heads at odd hours and ask them the worst. I think they were like a bit annoyed in the beginning. Hi, man, there are no hours. He's just asking questions what's the color of her pants in that particular scene? I'm like, can you send me a picture of what she's wearing? And 2 months in. So I was just like these weird things that I felt like I need to know a lot of things to be able to feel confident, to be able to visualize it. So I had a blast, and I have to say that has to do with a lot to do with my actors and a lot to do with the people that I was working with. Were so giving and so I don't know, if you gave them a piece of information, they really took it. When you give them a brief of okay, this is the character, this is what her room should look like, this is what I know for sure, this is what it's a bit abstract in my head, so please, you can figure it out. And they would really sort of come back with me oh, they really kept the things that I wanted, but also figured out everything that I didn't know. And they have their own view of looking at this particular room or this location or this scene. And it was just nice to have people who I all felt that they were all smarter than me. And I was like, that's great. MVP knows how to shoot better than I do, and that's the confidence that makes me confident. Because I'm like, okay, all of these things are sort of taken care of, and I can just give you an idea and you can turn it into a pragmatic thing. That's what I think perhaps, was a bit something that made me a bit anxious. So I'm like, I don't know if I have the right vernacular every time I want to, this is the shot. I can tell you how to put the camera and where to move the camera, but I don't know that how to explain to you what it needs to look like lighting wise. I can give you a reference, or I can tell you that I think it's a bit dark here. I don't know why, but I think it's a bit dark. And, but to take this abstract way of communication and really turn it into, something beautiful on screen, particularly for my DP, I have to say, Joe is incredible. Just really, really incredible person.
It's beautifully. I mean, every single frame looks like it's stunning. It's a photograph or a painting. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, it really, really does look like a painting. Yeah.
Everything, so much crammed into every single shot, and so much of the shot, it's just. There's only movement when you really want the movement and stuff, but there's so much an emotion and storytelling in there. It's just beautiful. So, how closely did you work with the DP on those kind of decisions?
Very, very, very closely. Every single, we had to. He was like my best friend on set. Really. He and I were, and we were staying in the same hotel, so we would chat after. After the shoot was over, we would have dinner in my room or his room. We were joined by the hip in that sense that we, and it was great because he was really, in a way, very similar way of looking at the film, but also very different. Mm-hmm. So whenever we argued, it was great because it was so, I love the fact that he really believed in what he was sort of, advocating for, and I did too. And there was zero ego involved, zero. To be we're really just both trying to do best by this particular scene. And we know the other person, even if we're I don't get it, I don't like it, this is not working, he would not take it personally, and I wouldn't take it personally either. And that was great because we, when we arrived at a scene, we always were in agreement that, okay, we know we're both in agreement that this is the shot that's working. We never had a disagreement once we decided and both okayed it. And, if we had a disagreement, we would keep trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Even if I said it's all good, but if he wasn't convinced, I would make sure that we do it and vice versa. So almost every single decision, camera-wise, is kind of very mutually agreed.
Collaboration.
Yeah, that's great. Did you spend, as I say, how much time, like say beforehand, did you go through images, and it'd be good to know what you did there, and how close was it to your final look? You know, all those images you found in your mood decks and then showed to Joe, your DP, and then the final image. How close was it? Do you feel like you stuck to your plan?
The mood board was paintings. Yeah. Yeah, my mood board was paintings, mostly by this one particular artist called Salman Dur, who then eventually was nice enough to lend us a painting and use it as a poster.
Oh, wow. Oh, I saw that online. Beautiful.
Yeah. So it was a full circle thing. I've never met him in my life. I don't know him personally, but it just happened that when the film was finished, I was like, I wish, when we were thinking about the poster, I wish he would do the poster. That would be the ideal. And I wrote to him somehow, his managers, and he was like, okay, send me the film. And then he saw the film and he gave us a painting. I was like, that's beautiful, because you kind of gave the film a visual, unintentionally sweetened to your paintings. So it was just paintings that I had, and of course I had a certain ideas, but we really did develop, like we discussed it way in advance. So Joe was hired, I want to say February is when I met him for the first time. I mean, Zoom. I only Zoomed with him. And I'd seen his work before because a mutual friend of ours is a director, and he'd shot for her a bunch of times. So we then, once he was sort of on board in March, we would just talk, I would say, once a week or once every 2 weeks. You know, he would read every new draft. We would talk through things, and we didn't put a pressure on ourselves to sort of come up with a visual language too soon. So I don't think we actually started discussing how we practically really want to shoot the film. Like, okay, is it handheld? Where is it handheld? Why is it handheld? You know, those we weren't being specific enough until much later in the summer, because we really just spoke about the story, and we spoke about the characters, and we spoke about just the themes, and just, I don't know, what emotional sort of through lines that we had for each character, and then for each scene, and then, you know, how we wanted to shift the tone, etc. So we had all of those conversations for months, and then we sort of came down to being like, okay, so what does it really mean? You know, all of this talk that we've done, like, you know, what does it mean really? How do we? And then we created these rules to be like, okay, how do we follow each character? You know, what's the visual language of the theater versus what's the visual language of the house? What are the contrasts that we're trying to sort of, you know, give a feeling for, you know, visually speaking, where is it a trap? Where is it sort of, you know, confining? Where is it not? Where do you feel a sense of freedom? You know, what are the relationships that have the most tenderness, and how do we shoot that? You know, like even sort of the two women at home, you know, who always were like, okay, we need to shoot them in a certain way where they're, you know, they kind of slowly become friends, almost alongside Biba and Heather becoming friends. So things like that, you know, that we created those rules, and then we shortlisted, I would say, a couple of weeks before the shoot. Even though he'd been on board from February, but we didn't go to shortlisting until literally 2-3 weeks before the shoot. We shortlisted, I want to say, about 70% of the film. Yeah. And some of them changed on set.
Okay.
You know, most of them we stuck to, but we were not like, it was a good plan to go in with, but we were not like completely married to it, in a sense that if the shot is not working, we just don't know what to do. You know, like the whole climax, the whole sort of big fight in the climax back at home between the sister-in-law, we hadn't shortlisted it because I can't rehearse this scene, so I can't tell you how to block the scene. And so I don't know where to put the camera.
Earlier you said you workshopped with the actors as well, so did a lot of the shot ideas come from workshopping with the actors as well? Yeah, it
was like both ways. Sometimes I would have the idea for a shot, so when I'm rehearsing the scene, once the actors are comfortable enough, I would sort of try and include that blocking into, because I'm like, this is how I want to shoot it, so let's try this blocking. And I would figure out in the workshops that, it's going to work, or it's not going to work. You know, because they're not motivated, they're not feeling this kind of movement in this particular scene, or they want to move, and I'm telling them to just stay seated on opposite corners of the room. It's not, you know, so we'd figured out a bunch of things, but then some scenes some of the most key scenes I couldn't rehearse much. Because like the scene where they break up, for example, you know, it's kind of a breakup scene, which is like, you know, it's very sexual and then suddenly becomes very volatile. You can't rehearse that scene. You've written that scene, you can rehearse it in terms of the intimacy blocking, to be like, okay, what are the actors comfortable with? And I did that. But I was like, I can't tell you to do it now, like 2 months before the shoot of the film. It's too, you don't know enough. I don't know enough. So that scene, we really shot it and blocked it all on the day off. And like nobody had an idea what we're shooting. Literally, I mean, it was written, but there's no, the dialogues were barely there. All the dialogue in that scene is very improvised. It's probably the most improvised scene of the film. It's probably the only improvised scene of the film where all the dialogue is improvised in a certain way. There were 2-3 lines that I'd given them each to be like, okay, you have to make sure you bung it in there. And they somehow did that. But yeah, so in that sense, that or the climax scene that I was talking about completely, because that's very written, like all the lines, all the everything, the beats are very written. But you can't ask actors to, I don't know, I didn't want to. Be like, okay, you don't know, you have none of you have a relationship with Mumtaz, really, so you're gonna just like have a shouting match in the rehearsal and put me off so much, so let's not do it. So
how did you deal with problems on set then? How did you deal with issues where things didn't go how you totally planned, or things always go wrong? How did you deal with them, and what advice would you give someone or yourself now moving forward?
I mean, as a generic thing, I would say it's a very patient job. You need to be very patient, I think. Like, you need to have an insane amount of patience. Like, I've never felt like a good person, like as good of a person as I felt on my set. Actually, I'm quite a good person, guys. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a good guy. I am not saying anything. I'm sitting quietly and I'm being nice still. And, with 5 hours, we've not shot a single shot because the trolley is not working. And, I'm not saying anything. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to figure out ways. I should be angry, but I'm not. So I was like, okay. But I really think so. I think directors don't get to have moods, which is the opposite of what I had seen and heard. I was like, as a director, you need to sort of either be helpful, because everybody's doing their job, ideally speaking. If somebody's not doing the job, it's a separate thing. But we had a great crew. So it wasn't, if something was going wrong, I knew it wasn't because of lack of trying. And it was because we had a lot of people on the crew it was their first film or their second film. But Lahore is not a place where a lot of films are made. So I had to, we had technical difficulties, like the scene through the window, the first scene between the husband and wife, where they're talking and getting dressed and stuff. I wanted to shoot it on a zoom. And then the zoom lens turned out that had a focus issue. And then so we had to create on the day off, because we didn't have that equipment coming in that day, just this dolly and jib that came in, and then we figured it out. And then they weren't like, the crew wasn't equipped enough to deal with that jib, and the pacing wasn't correct. And it was, we spent almost 5 to 6 hours not shooting anything on that day to get that jib and that trolley thing to work, for the camera to go in through the window, without shaking. And eventually ended up using a take from the Zoom. So I like things like these happen, but I don't know. I think your job is to just either be helpful or let people do their job. Like try to facilitate them into being faster and quicker, and call them out if they're being But I think a big part of the job is to kind of just handhold them and kind of rub their back and be like, it's okay, you got it, and like really. Half the time, that's what you're doing. Right.
Getting angry at people is never going to. It's just, I agree. Like all those kind of old Hollywood things of people shouting,
or making them anxious for no reason.
Helpful? Yeah.
Like throwing around your mood. It's the most awful thing.
Yeah.
I always like asking this question. Were there any happy accident moments? So, what, could have gone wrong, but actually it was a happy accident and it turned out great and it ended up in the film.
Small things. Like, I bet there are many others also, but my favorite, the funniest one is the scene between Heather and Biba where they're sitting in her room opposite each other, and then she offers him a glass and it breaks.
Yeah.
So I scripted it that it breaks.
Yes.
I was like, it's fun. And then my producers were like, if you're going to do this in a single take, which I was like, I'm not going to cut, then you can't break the glass, because then he has to tiptoe around it and it has to be a real glass, blah, blah, blah. He's going to injure himself, or she's going to injure herself. So you can't break the glass. It's too dangerous. And I was like, okay, sure. So on the day of the set, then my production designer brought 3 carpets so that the glass would not break. And for 6 takes, the glass didn't break. And we were like, I was happy with it. It was just, it used to fall and there was a carpet, doesn't break, but the water spilled. And of course, it was not even half the impact because, it wasn't a shocker. It was just a glass fell. It was kind of a lame thing. And the 7th take we were doing, and it was just for other reasons that we were doing this take. And, but we were very close to, like, performance-wise. I was like, okay, it's going to happen very soon. And she puts in the glass and he fell and it breaks for real. And so the actors were not prepared for that. And I was like, please keep going, man. Please keep fucking going. You guys are on my side. You know I wanted the glass to break. And they kept going. And they actually, because they were actually surprised, it turned into this other thing where they're really like, oh, so no, how do I actually take care of the glass? And then she's like, be careful, you'll hurt yourself. There's a real level of tension in that scene. And that's the take in the film. So it was a happy action.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, because I thought I was beautiful choreographed the way she stands up.
It's
like,
that's them. So that's them for real.
Static,
kind of incorporating the happy accident, and I was very proud of them. I was like, good job, guys.
You should be. Was there anything else on set that you learnt as well before we get to post? Was there anything you went, oh yes, I shouldn't have done that, or I'll take that forward for my next film? Or
many things. I think I realized one of the biggest things. I think I learned to be a bit shameless through the process of making the film, because I have a big sort of people pleaser. That's a personal thing. I have a big people pleaser. Like I need everybody to like me a lot on set. And I was like, if I'm the director, if I'm doing take number 27, obviously there's somebody on set who hates me right now.
Yep, not just one.
Not just one, and I need to be okay with it. And I learned that from a lot of, I learned that from my actors, like from Ali, who plays Heather. For example, because he would be so game all the time to do it one more time. I learned that from my DP, who is the best and the most shameless person on set. Like, he would change things on the last go for me, and he would not even tell them that that's what the director's asking for. He would be like, yeah, we're changing it now, so what? Let's just switch, that's not working. That's why we're doing it. So, like, we're not like having fun shifting around, wasting anybody's time. Nobody likes that. We're doing it for a reason. So let's just do it. What's the problem? Just not having this kind of sense of your only loyalty is to keep the people on your set happy and safe, but to the film. And if something's not working in the film, you just, don't be an asshole, but do what needs to be done for the film, because you're going to regret it much later. If a person has in a foul mood, they're going to get over it in a couple of hours or the next day, you can apologize to them. It'll work out, but the film's going to stay what it is forever. So don't be, be a bit.
Yeah, very nice. And then moving on to post then, in terms of the edit, going through that, did you rewrite in the edit stage? It's something a lot of people say. They come to it and they go, oh yes, we can move this scene, we can do this. Oh, I'll put an ADR line, additional dialogue line in to change it. Did that happen for you? What was the post process, your editing process like?
I wouldn't say they were like very big changes. We tried a lot of things. Me and my co-editor, my editor Jasmine, so she's from Brazil, also Colombia, fine, of the 3 girls that were on the film in key roles, Purva, Maggie, and Jasmine. So she was a big fan of like trying things and moving things around. And, we sometimes I would be a bit like protective and be like, no, how can you say the scene can go there? Like, how can you even try this thing? It makes no sense. This is the, like, and she'd be like, shut the fuck up. And then she would just turn it around and like, because she knew, and she's amazing, like really amazing. And she's actually a writer-director. And I got her on board because she has this very clear sense of story and arcs and emotional sort of, progression and so many, things like that. And has such a great eye for performance as well. So we did a lot. I mean, of course, we cut out about, the first cut was about 2 hours, 50 minutes. And it was, now it's 2 hours, 6 minutes. So we cut out about 45 minutes and just kind of curated performances and characters to be so multidimensional, and then this is interesting to see how you do that with different takes. To be like, we've picked this particular kind of performance in this scene. So we've shown this kind of, mostly a feeling. It's not something you can pinpoint, but we've shown this facet of this particular character in this scene. In another scene, let's pick a slightly, even though that might not be his best performance, but let's pick it so that it gives you a different idea about this character, maybe, otherwise, if you're picking the best performance, but in every scene he's a bit scared or he's a bit anxious, you're like, no, let's not pick the anxious performance in this one. Let's pick a slightly different one. So she was amazing in that respect, and just overall curating an emotional through line for the film, and balancing between the characters was the biggest. So I think the biggest challenge was how do you introduce the film as a romance and get the audience going for the romance and then eventually tell them it was never about the romance, really. It was about this other third girl, and it was about the love story was between the husband and wife, really, but we ignored that. How do you create something like that, and how do you sort of give room to supporting characters, like the sister-in-law or the neighborhood lady or the father, so they're a bit more without it being distracting or being like, oh, why are we going with this character? We don't care about this character, So sort of building that, I think she was really instrumental in.
You shot it in 4:3 ratio, didn't you?
Yes.
Can you very quickly just talk through the decision of why?
I shot 4:3. My previous two shorts are also in 4:3. So I just generally have like a aesthetic preference for 4:3. I don't know why. I find it to be a more elegant frame. And particularly with this film, we had a bunch of. So we didn't decide on 4:3. We discussed it a bunch of times, me and Joe, and then we eventually landed on it because we wanted to sort of know why we're shooting it in this ratio and how is it best suited for the story, apart from an aesthetic preference, which I think is fine enough. But for this one, again, for me, I was like, it's such a subjective story of different people. And then you keep going back and forth between these different people, at least the main three. So you kind of follow them individually. And then it's not just one, it's many. So you need to have, I don't know, a faster, a more immediate way of for like forming an intimate relationship between their face and the viewer. And somehow facing a close-up in 4:3 is just so different, the feeling, compared to framing it in a wider, it's so intimate, there's really nothing else in the world except their face. And so it was something that kind of clicked with me as one of the reasons. And secondly, just there's this weird sense of claustrophobia that comes into into the frame, and then the world exists, but it's always a bit on the outside. And that it was, again, as a feeling, it was correct because you wanted the world to be present because it's so much about what the world is doing to these characters. But you always wanted the experience to be very subjective for them, for us to not really ever actually engage with that world, but only to engage with the character.
It felt like sort of, obviously, like it's kind of almost like a reflection of the constraints of the patriarchal society as well. Sort of, it felt it was like I felt the same a little bit as they would, I suppose. All the different characters are constrained somehow, men and women, especially the female characters. But expectations and that kind of
rigidity
kind of forced me to kind of feel like that in a really, really good way, not in a bad way.
4:3, yeah.
So what's next then? I'm
writing with Jasmine. Jasmine, who edited Joyland with me, is now we're co-writing something for a script that she's going to direct. That's going to be her feature debut. So that's nice because I love that story and I'm so invested in it. But there's a level of distance to it because it's a germ that she came up with. It's a film that she's going to direct. So, but I love it. I'm very invested in it. So it's a nice sort of half break that I get before I get into something that I'm going to sort of have to see through from beginning to end. Yeah.
Oh, that's really
amazing.
Cool.
Well, huge good luck.
Thank you so much, guys.
Just going to say massive congratulations. Absolutely loved the film. It's beautiful, beautiful, and best of luck.
Yeah, I can't wait to see this on the cinema screen. I think it's out over here, which is, that'd be beautiful on the cinema. We need to watch it.
Yeah, it is. I would say people think independent movies you can watch it at home, but I think no.
No,
I think watching it in the cinema is much better.
Yeah,
like I've seen it one or two twice, and I kind of got bored at home. But in a theater, I'm like, let's stay a bit. It's kind of nice.
Amazing.
Very true. Saim Sadiq, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
For your time. Good luck with everything. And can't wait to see what you do next as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I love talking to you.
Bye. Bye.